Hey guys, welcome to the Pitaya Movie Channel. Let's continue with Christopher Nolan's most classic movie, Inception. In the previous chapter, we discussed the formation of the Dream Team. Now they are to dive deeply into the dream world to influence the wealthy heir Robert to embrace the notion of dissolving his father's company. How should they proceed? Firstly, they needed to understand his relationship with his father. As Freud posited, most of human behaviors can be traced back to childhood experiences. Robert, a child deprived of fatherly love, harbored complex emotions towards his father. Hence, the dream thieves plan to approach from this angle, convincing him that his father wished him to have his own life, not to follow the path of his elders. Yet this was merely a tentative plan. The world of dreams was full of uncertainties, requiring them to adapt as situations changed. Eames suggested, hinting to Robert that dissolving the company would be a form of resisting against his father. But Cobb believed positive emotions could always overcome the negative. To achieve psychological congruence and catharsis, Robert needed to harbor positive feelings about the whole matter. Thus, they needed to make Robert believe that his father wished him to start his own business rather than following his father's footsteps. The team required a more precise Inception objective. At this moment, old Fisher passed away. Wealthy heir. Robert needed to take a flight from Sydney to Los Angeles for the funeral. Saito acquired the airline. The flight was scheduled for 10 hours. In the dream, where time slowed down, it would be sufficient for them to implant the idea everything went smoothly. Robert was sedated. With the cooperation of the flight attendants, they all injected a powerful sedative and entered his dream. Actually, it's a design dream. The first layer of dream took place in a city soaked in torrential rain. Their plan was to lure Robert into a taxi, then bind him to a predetermined location. However, a group of armed individuals appeared, catching them off guard. After a difficult escape, it turned out that the wealthy heir had received subconscious training. Those who had just attacked them were the manifestations of his armed subconscious. While Arthur, the investigator, was entirely unaware of this, Saito was also severely wounded in the gunfight. Eames wanted to kill Saito so he could wake up in reality rather than suffering in the dream, because pain was felt in dreams, but Cobb stopped him. It was then everyone learned of Cobb's deception. Apparently, the sedative they all injected was too strong. Dying like this wouldn't allow them to wake up. Instead, they would fall into limbo, the most primitive dream where only endless raw subconscious existed. To wake up, they needed to wait for the drug to wear off, but the duration was uncertain, maybe decades, perhaps forever. Cobb was the only one who had been there. Now they must confront Robert's private armed force. Their chances of survival seemed slim. Everyone fell into panic and dispute. Here emerges a novel concept, the limbo, a lost domain. Originally, limbo was a term within Catholic doctrine. It appeared in numerous European literary works, a gray area situated between heaven and hell. Here, Nolan used it to denote the fringe of the dream world under the influence of powerful sedatives. Should one die in the dream, she would fall into the limbo. There, one would lose the majority of her memory. The lost domain in reality was not frightening itself. As long as one dies there, one can still return to the real world. The biggest problem was forgetting that death was a return to the reality. Due to the vast time difference there, a few minutes in the real world could translate into decades there before you could even remember how to escape. You would have aged significantly. At this point, even tearing Cobb apart would be useless. All hoped to complete the task swiftly and return to the reality. Next was the interrogation of the wealthy heir. They needed to implant a belief in him within a layer of the dream that his father had a safe in which the real will was kept. So, the imposter Eames pretended as his father's confidant. Browning entered the interrogation room, told him that his father loved him, only in a peculiar way. This was equivalent to planting a seed in the wealthy heir's mind. By the second or third layer of the dream, he would actively look for the will. Here also inserted a conversation between Ariadne and Cobb. Discussing his wife, Mal, Cobb told Ariadne a story. In this story, Cobb portrayed himself as a victim, recounted how he and his wife explored the various possibilities of dreams. Eventually, they delved into the deep subconscious. There, they lived for 50 years. Upon their return to the reality, his wife believed that the reality was also a dream, insistent on suicide. No matter how Cobb tried to dissuade her, his wife eventually chose to leap from a building, even using various methods to make the police believe that Cobb was the killer. Hence, Cobb had to flee abroad and could not return home. Please be noted. The story Cobb told had a big twist at the end. For instance, how they returned from the deep subconscious to the reality Cobb simply glossed over. In this relationship, he was certainly not just a victim. At this juncture, the wealthy heir's defensive projection struck. They urgently needed to relocate. They all gathered in a vehicle with the defense force in hot pursuit. At this moment, they needed to enter the second layer of the dream, given the 20-fold time difference. There's sufficient time within the dream of the lower layer. The second layer of the dream took place in a hotel where the wealthy heir was being solicited by a lady upon leaving. The lady left him a phone number, which was exactly the 6-digit number, voiced by the wealthy heir within the dream. This was still about reinforcing his subconscious, making him believe in the previously fabricated story. This coquettish lady was Eames in disguise. Cobb continued his manipulative tactics, making the wealthy heir believe that he was there to protect him, then persuaded him to enter a deeper layer of the dream. Where idea implantation would convince him thoroughly, the third layer of the dream was on a snow-capped mountain. Their objective was to attack a nearby hospital. Cobb convinced the wealthy heir that his father's will was hidden there. The atmosphere in this part pays homage to the 007 series on Her Majesty's Secret Service. One detail to note, the environmental atmosphere of the 3 layers of dream progressively diminished. The first layer was a bustling city. The second was a hotel. The third was a desolate, snow-capped mountain. In other words, the deeper the dream layer, the fewer and more concentrated the consciousness became. What followed was the use of cross-cutting montage to exhibit the situation within the 3 layers of dream. The first layer involved car chasing the second. Arthur was fighting with the defensive projection, the third, a snowfield gunfight. This was when we arrive at the most thrilling design within Inception. Nolan took the cross-cutting montage editing pattern, invented more than 100 years ago by the father of cinema, David Wart Griffith, for the last-minute rescue, and elevated it to its peak, for the group to safely extricate themselves from these 3 layers of dream. There was only one method, which was to execute a synchronized kick in every layer. In the first layer, the car broke through the bridge railing. Entering freefall, the car's descent to the water surface took about 2 to 3 seconds. In the second layer, Arthur, who was left behind, needed to set up the explosives to synchronize the fall of the sleepers. His time was 20 times that of the first layer, approximately a minute or so. Then, in the third layer, the group needed to break through the defense, open the safe to find the will, then blew up the hospital. The time here was 20 times that of the second layer. Roughly 20 minutes, Nolan essentially set up a 3-layered last-minute rescue, fully mobilizing the audience's tension. Within these 3 spectacles, the second layer where Arthur resided was the most captivating. This segment of combat in 0 gravity remained as authentic footage. Nolan crafted a one model spanning 100 feet, utilizing camera rotations to manifest effects. Originally, everything seemed rather seamless. The wealthy heir reached the hospital without a hitch behind that vault door, laid the answer he was looking for. At this point, Mal from Cobb's subconscious emerged to make trouble. Saito, due to a gunshot wound in the first layer, consequently a diminished combat capabilities in this one. Mal landed a shot on the wealthy heir. Cobb, left with no choice, had to shoot down his own wife. At this moment, Robert was not deceased, merely shocked and dropped into the next layer, the 4th layer of the dream. Cobb perceived this as mission failure, but Ariadne was reluctant to give up. She proposed to descend to the 4th layer to rescue Robert, since delving another layer would extend time 20-fold. Surely there was sufficient time. Cobb was persuaded and descended to the 4th layer with Ariadne. This 4th layer was where Cobb and his wife spent over 50 years of their lives. The houses they built back then remained intact. Cobb deduced that Robert must be with his wife, Mal. Thus the duo went searching for him. Indeed, they found Mal. She was the one who captured Robert. The ensuing conversation between Cobb and Mal supplemented the story he had previously narrated to Ariadne. Mal's obsession with being in a dream was entirely the work of Cobb. He implanted the idea that your world isn't real deep within Mal's mind. His reasoning for such action was that after coexisting for 50 years, he grew weary and yearned to return. Yet his wife Mal was hopelessly enthralled by the bliss of the dream. Only this way could he tempt her to return to the real world through a mutual suicide. Cobb indeed succeeded. Both of them found themselves in front of the railroad tracks. This scene was deeply engraved in Cobb's memory. Hence, a train showed up during the gunfight in the first layer. That was a reflection of his subconscious. Cobb professed his affectionate confession on the railroad tracks the train sped past. But the repercussions of this act soon revealed themselves upon returning to the real world. Mal's thought that your world isn't real persisted. She doubted the authenticity of the real world. Hence, she persuaded Cobb by every means possible to commit suicide with her, to return to what she considered to be real, yet was actually a dream world. This led to the aforementioned scene of suicide by jumping from a building. This tragedy could be said to be the handiwork of Cobb. Cobb agreed to stay and accompany Mal. Consequently, Mal relinquished Robert. In her panic, Ariadne shot Mal. And along with Robert, they jumped from the building, returning to the third layer of the dream. Here laid a plot point that completely baffled me. I've truly watched it 3 times over, paid attention to every single line, but still feel it's an incongruity that doesn't make sense. That was whether the fourth layer of the dream and limbo were the same thing. At the 77th minute of the movie, Cobb said his wife took limbo as the reality. This clearly implied that the place where they lived for 50 years, built many houses, was indeed limbo. When Saito died in the third layer of the dream, Cobb stated that he was somewhere in the fourth layer of the dream, which also indicated that the fourth layer was actually limbo. If the fourth layer of the dream was indeed limbo, then according to the basic setup of the movie, dying in limbo directly brings you back to the reality. However, after Robert and Ariadne jumped from the building, they actually returned to the third layer, which conflicted with the basic setting of the movie. Some people argued that jumping from a building counted as a kick. But in the beginning of the movie, during the extraction of Saito's subconscious, Cobb was kicked in the first layer of the dream, which allowed him to break free from the second layer of the dream. That is, you can only kick the dreamer from the layer above. For the kick to work, if Ariadne's jumping off a building counted as a kick, then anyone could jump off a building at any time to return to the previous layer without needing any assistance from others. In that case, what's the point of the kick setup? Furthermore, Cobb mentioned that in Limbo 1 would lose the majority of their memories. Yet neither Cobb nor Ariadne forgot anything. They remained clear and continued with their mission. This created another contradiction that wasn't self-consistent. Well, let's put that aside for now and continue with the story. Robert returned to the third layer, used the 6-digit password to open the vault. Inside was his dying father. Robert opened the safe beside the sick bed. Inside was a pre-prepared will. The general idea was, my son, walk your own path in life. Don't let this family business hinder you. Moved to tears, the son wept bitterly. Eames, witnessing this scene, knew their mission was successful. Following this was the synchronized kick mentioned earlier. The hospital on the third layer was blown up. The elevator on the second layer was blown up. The van on the first layer hit the water. They returned to the first layer of the dream. Only 2 people didn't come back. The first was Saito, who had died on the third layer. He had gone to limbo. The second was Cobb. He was drowned in the water in the first layer, which was to say, he went to limbo. This led to the scene at the beginning of the movie where he woke up on a beach and was taken to meet an elderly Saito. At this point, the plot connected back to the beginning. Although only a short time had passed in the real world, time moved much slower in limbo, which explained why Saito had aged so much upon seeing Cobb and the spinning top. He realized that he's in a dream and remembered that committing suicide could bring him back to the reality. In this scene, Cobb woke up first. A while passed before Saito awakened. One could surmise within the realm of limbo, Saito was the first to extinguish Cobb's life. Only to take his own thereafter, Saito kept his promise. Indeed, with wealth came unfettered power. A single phone call he dialed and Cobb's wanted status was promptly annulled. All members effortlessly cleared customs. Robert next was set to dismiss his father's business empire, believing all these events to be the guide of destiny. Not an iota of doubt did he harbor. Cobb's father-in-law arrived at the airport to pick him up. Once more, he returned to the home he had long parted from and beheld the children he had long yearned for. Cobb habitually spun his spinning top, observing his children's figures. Until they turned around, he strode up swiftly for an hug. The camera gently swiveled to the spinning top on the table. The film abruptly ended. Had the top stopped spinning? Was Cobb trapped within a dream, or had he returned to the reality? Nolan cunningly left a tail, leaving it to the audience to think I am inclined to believe he had returned to the reality, firstly observing the top's spinning motion and sound. It should fall secondly throughout the entire story. Every time Cobb recalled his two children, we do not see their faces. Yet this time both children turned around. Thirdly, an intricate rule discovered by international netizens after the death of Cobb's wife Mal. It mattered not whether she was alive or dead. If Cobb wore a wedding ring on his left hand, he was undoubtedly in a dream. When he was not wearing it, he was in reality. This rule did not have a single exception. When he woke up from the plane and returned home, we could clearly see he was not wearing a ring. This substantiated that he had returned to the reality, reuniting with his children. But returning to the question of what is real, what is a dream, who can truly define them? Inception adheres to Nolan's consistent philosophical core. What is the essence of reality, following fragments of memory? The prestige in Inception. Nolan discussed this core in both his conclusion, carried a touch of fatalism. People only believe what they wish to believe, even if that was a dream, as long as one could convince oneself it is the reality. For the reality can oftentimes be unbearably harsh. In Inception, there was a scene when Cobb went to find the pharmacist. He saw a house full of people, all dreaming. The old man said they had made dreams their reality, no longer discerning their boundaries. Indeed, Nolan's appeal is such. If you do not wish to think too much, Inception can merely be a sci-fi thriller, a mystery romance, or even an exciting action gunfight movie. Yet if you wish to delve deeper, it is fine as well, provoking thought for days, yet still leaving you unsatiated. Perhaps this is the charm of Nolan's movies. He can be considered as a true dream weaver of light and shadow. That concludes this video. Thank you for your unwavering support. See you next time.